Welcome to Changing Suits. We're your hosts, Bal
and Taj, discussing the latest news, views, and general life for us Western Asians.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
Today we'll be talking to Ragini from the Brown Therapist Network. Now, Ragini has her own practice, which she's quite recently opened in London, specifically for South Asians. She also provides a number of resources for women to help in mental health as well. So just before we set off, because today we are going to be talking about a very interesting subject, something I've been looking forward to for quite a while, only because Taj talks about Bollywood so much in our podcasts.
I do, and I love talking about Bollywood. So I'm really happy about this topic, to be honest.
So before we get into that, can we get you to introduce yourself, Ragini?
Sure. Hi, thank you for having me. I just opened my own practice and I'm really focused on mental health in the South Asian sphere. So that has been my biggest focus, and I wanted to include kind of the aspect of media that we're about to talk about because I think pop culture affects mental health a lot and our relationships a lot. So I'm excited about this topic as well.
Just in regards to the fact that you have gone down the therapy route for specifically South Asian people, what got you interested in that particular area?
So I think I realized, and when I was training also, there were maybe like 6 or 7 other clinicians who were trained in cultural relevance. And I'm not even talking about Asian counselors. I'm talking about any sort of training that involves, culture and like taking someone's culture into account. And so I was thinking about, if my mother or my grandmother, they're looking for resources or they're looking for a therapist, where do they go? What do they do? It's such an inaccessible space. So I wanted to create easy ways for them to access services like this and see familiar faces in mental health in general. That was really my biggest motivator.
What do you think, for example, like you mentioned, your mother, your grandmother, even our generation, although you're probably much younger than myself, why do you think it makes a difference to go to a therapist that's South Asian and understands the background? I might have kind of just answered my question there, but why there and not just any service open to the wider community?
Yeah, I mean, they can, and I think a lot of people do. But I also hear from a lot of my clients that the, Western psychology just wasn't relevant to them in many ways when it comes to family dynamics, when it comes to control, shame. These kind of things come up a lot, and a white therapist might not understand, a lot of things, especially the word abuse is thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
Things that we may not consider abuse is it's very much like you should just leave the house if that's happening, or you need to tell your mother that she can't talk to you like that. and it's just not relevant. So yeah.
But then
Yeah.
on that point, do you think in that case, only because you've mentioned it, that we then have a sort of higher threshold where we would consider something unacceptable, whereas perhaps in Western society it would be unacceptable?
Yes, and I completely understand. I never want to normalize any sort of toxic behavior, but it's just a different dynamic. And somebody was telling me about, can we normalize adults still having to listen to their parents? It doesn't mean that they're controlling us. Like, it's just a different way of thinking about it. So those kind of small nuances come up. Yeah, it's just a different way of thinking about it.
Me and Belle are smiling from ear to ear because we're like, yeah, we know what you're talking about. Because myself, I did go to a counsellor, and she was a white counsellor. And at the time, I was in a very low period of my life. And I had to explain the family dynamics right from A to Z. And it was like, I haven't got the energy to do this. I need you to know already what I'm about. and then in the end, she actually, and credit to her, she goes, I really don't think I can support you because I don't understand your culture. And I was like, hands
Wow.
up to you. I credit you for just even coming forward and admitting that. And so
Yeah.
that's why I was nodding all the way through when you were talking, basically.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think also like I really want to emphasize that it's not a matter of normalizing terrible parenting or, parents hurting their children or anything like that, or any of the toxic dynamics that happen. I recognize that. I think it's just a different conversation. That's all. I hope that makes sense.
No, it completely does, and which is
Yeah.
why we're nodding our heads, like it makes sense. Because
Yeah.
again, the reason we started this podcast was because of that difference in Eastern and Western culture, where we've sort of fitted into the middle, but we have to sort of look both sides. And
Mm.
on that point, whilst you were studying, what was your outlook in the fact that you were, I'm assuming, one of the few Asians in your class, for example,
Mm.
compared to people that were white that had a different outlook on a lot of subjects? Was there a difference, and did you see it slightly different to your peers might have seen it?
Yeah, I think there were maybe two other people in my entire department that were not white. So not just like in my class, like in the whole psychology department.
How big would a department be? Because I'm thinking
A few hundred, yeah, a few hundred. So quite a lot of people, and they would call. I'll just make up a name for the other girl, but they would call me Priya all the time, and they would call Priya Ragini all the time, and it was just like,
because you look the same.
yeah, because all brown people look the same,
But
obviously.
then this is okay on this point, and I'm going to divert very slightly, and we're completely going off the subject we are all looking forward to. But
Because this is really interesting. That's
you've
why.
just brought up some really interesting points. Did you at that point realize that them mixing up you with Priya can be seen as racism? That is the truth if we're looking at it on a politically correct in 2022
I
view.
know. It's
We
so
think
hard.
the thing is, we think it is normal. I've had this conversation with one of my really
It's
close white
true.
friends, but we can look at it and say, actually, that's pretty racist.
I know.
It's
And you're right. I think it's so hard to accept that, even because you want to just say, it's fine, like let's just move on. You don't want to make a fuss, but it's true. You're right.
We will move on to Bollywood, but I want to add this bit, and I feel that Bal wants to add something. Now, my worry is if they had a South Asian client coming to them and they had a few of them, would they mix their names
They
up?
mix them up.
And if they did,
I
because
know.
then you'll be reading a different set of case notes. But not the only worry, but one of my worries, to be honest. Bao, I can see that you're dying to say something as well, because this is so interesting.
I think this whole sphere is interesting. I think this is a whole other podcast, to be fair. So we will probably call Ragini back and say,
Let's go down this other rabbit hole. Yeah, absolutely.
But I've been looking forward to the next subject. So in regards to the fact that obviously there are differences in culture, obviously this has brought us up to the fact that we do want to talk about Bollywood, which has a massive impact on so many South Asians. Now, you've obviously got a special interest in Bollywood. Can I ask what has brought that interest about?
So I mean, I grew up in India, and the first movie I ever saw, I was like 14, 15 months old, and DDLJ had just come out, and we went to this like tiny little theater in India, the kind that have like the huge fans, that they didn't even have AC at that time.
Oh dear,
And
in India that's never a good thing.
yeah, so at that time it was like really exciting to go to a movie, the early 90s, and I just, since then, it's been like a lifelong love. Very hard to defend at times, which we will obviously get into, but that's kind of what makes it even more interesting, is that I feel so connected to it, but then it's also really hard to sometimes take that social justice hat off and just watch and just enjoy, rather than constantly thinking like, they shouldn't have said that, or that's so problematic, or whatever.
So you were obviously quite young when you went to see your first Bollywood film, and
Yeah.
it's, you've said that it's gone on for a very long time, you love your Bollywood films.
Yeah.
What is it that you love? And I can answer the question, but I love hearing someone else tell me the answer to Bollywood, because why wouldn't you love it?
Yeah, it's so funny. Nobody's ever asked me that before. Maybe everyone just took for granted that everybody loves it. But yeah, I think it's just the romance of it all, and not just like the love romance, but the fantasy of it all, you know? It's so it just makes you believe in love, and you know, I've grown up singing the songs, and it connects everybody in such a strong way. I mean, you could have absolutely nothing in common with someone, but if you've both seen Shah Rukh Khan, you know, that just immediately connects you.
Surely everyone's seen Shah Rukh Khan, even if you do or don't watch Bollywood. Everyone
Yeah,
has seen Shah Rukh Khan.
exactly. I know. You
Apart
don't
from my
even have to be
husband.
Indian.
I was going to say, my husband does not watch any Bollywood films, so he does not know anything about it. He hasn't even watched Sholay.
Oh.
Like, where can you go from there? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, it's a dead end.
Yeah, deal breaker.
Obviously not, they're still married.
That is true.
So in regards to Bollywood, it is a massive industry.
Mm.
I remember when I went to, I think it was Egypt. They hadn't seen, because we are Sikh, they hadn't seen Sikh people. However, you mentioned Bollywood, I agree, there was that connection. They had seen all the dancing and
Yeah.
the romance of it. You're right, it is a romance, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you've grown, and obviously with your profession being what it is, what have you seen that is slightly different from what you saw when you were watching it when you were younger?
Like, how has it changed? How have the movies changed?
Yeah. How's your perspective changed of Bollywood?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously the movies themselves have changed, but that's true. The way you watch it changes. As you grow, as I learned about, you know, feminism, as I learned about social justice and all these things, then you start to watch them with that lens, and it's really hard to turn that off, and just like
Enjoy the film?
every
Yeah.
dynamic, then you're like, ooh, was this okay? It's really hard, and I actually had to actively stop watching interviews of the real actors, because I used to always watch them to see like what they said about the movie and all these things, and then they just would double down on some of the problematic things, or they would say things that were just so upsetting, and I just was like, I have to separate.
Okay, on that point, what could you just expand on that? Because I haven't seen many of the interviews post films. So what is it that upset you about those interviews?
So like Kabir Singh just came out, right? And that was very controversial. And I was like, you know, I've been such a fan of Shahid's for so long, since Ishq Vishk, which was like early 2000s. And I just wanted him to say that something like, yeah, we shouldn't have said this or do this, like whatever. And he just kept doubling down on it. He just kept saying, well, you know, Geet in Jab We Met was a very dominant character. Nobody had a problem with that. Or, you know, so what's the big deal? Like, people should be able to slap each other if they're in love, you know? And I was like, Shahid, I need to just I need to just not take this so personally right now.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, both of us are speechless. Like, oh, okay.
That wouldn't have gone
Yeah.
down well with me. That would have put me right off.
How do you think that then affects how fans see those actors then? Because obviously you've had a negative impact. Does it actually have a negative impact for that celebrity? Because they are treated, and I'm going to put it in comments, like gods in India.
I know. Yeah.
But does it actually have an impact on them, despite them saying this?
No. You know, there's something that's really important, like even from a psychological perspective, is that the success of these movies gives us an insight into what society actually believes, and more importantly, what they actually want. So they could very easily say, if you keep making movies like this, we're not going to watch it, you know? Or they could very easily just say that, you know, this is unacceptable. We are not, you know, we're just not going to support you anymore. If people unfollowed, you know, there's so many things that could happen, but it doesn't. And that makes you wonder, Like, is this what you're looking for?
Well, this is the
Yeah.
thing. I mean, you could say that about social media, for example. We're all well aware that Facebook and Instagram tend to do really well on the negative news rather than the positive
Yeah.
news. And it's the same thing with Hollywood and Bollywood. What would be your? I mean, I've always made it quite clear. I mean, I'm not great with social media. My Bollywood is from good old days when we were growing up, and all I remember is the dancing and the fantastic
Yeah.
songs.
Yeah.
And then obviously we've had, you know, some of those greats pass away in the last few weeks. Lata Mangeshkar pass away,
Yeah.
and those are the things I remember. But any of the political, social, mental health aspects, I don't tend to remember. So, what's your outlook on how Bollywood has responded to society and the way society reacts to Bollywood? Just following on from what you've said.
I mean, it wasn't until recently that anybody even expected celebrities to have this knowledge, right? I mean, before it was like, should we even expect them to have this knowledge? I mean, should they even be involved in politics and social justice and things like that? Some people would say yes, because they have this huge platform, and I completely understand that. But on the other hand, who are they to comment on these things? You know, can I expect Shahid Kapoor to have read feminist theory? You know, like, is that a reasonable expectation? Is that his job? No, it's not. But unfortunately, it does affect people a lot. And you know, somebody was saying that in the theater, there's a scene. The famous scene in Kabir Singh is when he slaps her, and he has an anger problem, whatever. And there were men in the audience who were clapping.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you know, the women who were watching were feeling really weird and unsafe. And so, you know, you can't deny that it has that impact, like that it's there. And they keep defending it by saying, well, nobody's really impacted by it, you know, it's just movies. And in the 90s and the 2000s, that was true. But it's now that people are more aware of these issues and are speaking up a bit more, it's not that easy, you know, it's a lot more complicated.
Can I just ask where they were clapping in the cinemas? Was that here in the UK or was that in India?
That was in India, but it was worldwide success, right? It wasn't just in India.
That is just with you saying all of us have sort of gone, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Following on from what you've said as to do we expect our celebrities to know that much information about the character they're about to.
You obviously don't make any political statements, unlike your dad.
I don't make political statements because I don't follow politics.
Sure.
You know, politics don't make a difference in my life. You know, I'm not at the brunt of anything. I'm living a very luxurious life. You know, I don't have any issues. I don't have water problem. I don't have housing problem. I don't have all of that. So who am I to comment on politics? You know, if I'm a privileged person.
I mean, from my perspective, I'd say yes, because they've got such a huge following. That is a big responsibility. A lot of the political issues, both here and, you know, this isn't just Bollywood, it's something in Hollywood as well. Whereas a lot of, you know, look at someone like Angelina Jolie, for example, on a massive political platform, for example, now. So it does really beg to question as to how much, going back to your question, how much should they know themselves and how much responsibility they've got in the industry, doesn't it? You've made me think today. Oh, this is just derailed my thought process now.
Yeah, I think you need to watch some of the newer movies so you can catch up on all this.
But let's reel back and let's talk about the visuals in Bollywood, as in what the appearance of actors look like. Because whenever I think of an actor in Bollywood, slim, beautiful, a majority of them are light-skinned, and that is beauty at the moment in the cinemas on Bollywood. Back in the 80s, it was a rounder, curvier woman, and things have changed. And obviously that impacts the people that are watching the films and their mental health, because they're expected to be this perfect person. Do you think that's affecting males and females?
Yes. You know, I mean, I can give you a couple of examples right now where men and women actors basically darkened their skin for the role and then went back to being super light skinned. And just literally about 2 months ago, this movie came out, Pushpa, and the main actress is very, very light skinned, but for the role, because she was playing a lower class person, she darkened her skin a lot. And yeah, I mean, obviously that makes people angry. It makes people, for her it's a choice, but obviously for so many people it's not. And to imply that making her skin darker means that it's a lower class character or whatever it is.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. So we're going to go back and talk about Bollywood and the effects that then has on the clients that you see and family members that you've seen. Now, Taj always has a really strong viewpoint of Bollywood.
Basically, I was talking about how in Bollywood, marriage and love, when you meet someone, you expect people to come around dancing, not literally, but in your head, you're thinking it's going to be like this, the music's going to be playing in the background. And then I remember when I got married, the day after, I thought it was going to be this amazing thing. Not saying that it wasn't, but all of a sudden, reality hit. And it was just the day-to-day stuff. And everyone was like, all right, what do you want to eat? I was like, okay. I want to be served in platters of food and stuff. It was not like that.
They don't do that in the Bollywood films. What do you want to eat?
They don't.
They always have that very intense Karwa Chauth scene. That's kind of like that.
What do you find with your clients and family members, Ragini, in regards to what they see in Bollywood?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fun to joke about, right? Like, oh, he gets so jealous, he gets so whatever, or like, but I have a younger sister, and I do worry, that when these kind of things are normalized, it's just scary to think that, like, if someone punches a hole in the wall or like has a garam khoon kind of thing, is very glorified to say that he's just so passionate. It's not that he has an anger problem. He just loves me so much he can't control it.
Have you heard that being said in regards to the passion?
Yeah, where they'll say things like, I want a man, like I want somebody who gets that kind of jealous for me, or they fight for me. And I always tell them that sometimes, we get so used to the drama and the toxicity that when someone normal comes along, it seems like it's boring. Or it's like the healthy one seems like, oh, maybe there's no spark. But fear and drama is not a spark. Like, that's just anxiety. I hate to break it to you, but yeah, that's where it gets the gray area.
But someone that watches a lot of Bollywood, would they understand that explanation? Because we know from mental health, anything you tend to be around, anything you watch, it does have an impact on your mental health. So someone that is intensely watching Bollywood, would your explanation there really sink in?
I don't know. I mean, there are obviously characters who are really healthy, and they are like really good examples of what you would want in a partner. Like, in Jab We Met, that was such a nice relationship. Or Dil Dhadakne Do, we have Farhan Akhtar's character is just a dream. He's a feminist, and he's really like kind and funny, and so there are examples. So I'll say go for the Sunny, not the Kabir, and then they'll understand, like, okay, now I have a visual of what to look for.
But would they think this character is boring because they're not passionate and punching walls?
That's may take a few sessions, but it's really getting to the root of what that means to you, and like why you are romanticizing that. And I do hope that people can kind of separate that kind of behavior from real life, because I think when you see it on the screen and you feel detached from it and you romanticize it, but when it actually happens, would you react that way? Probably not.
Do you think also, in regards to mental health, now Bollywood has come a long way,
Yeah.
Films
Yeah.
now, there are a number of films that do address mental health in a serious way. Now, that hasn't always been the case, obviously. It was
Yeah.
very much, mental health was very much simplified in most communities. But again, Bollywood
Mm-hmm.
being Bollywood and the big giant monster it is, the
Mm-hmm.
simplification of someone was mad or someone had a split personality and it was the drama that came with that. How do you think that's changed over the years?
It's getting there. Yeah. I mean, in Dear Zindagi, she has a healthy therapeutic relationship, and she goes to therapy and they explain what therapy is, which I love. And he says, that I'm a mind doctor, and like he explains it in very like easy to understand terms. And I hope more movies like that come out. And I like all of this. I don't want to say that it's only limited to the Asian context, because I feel like when we do that, it makes people associate, oh, the West is more progressive and the East is like still catching up. That's not at all the case.
Yeah.
This happens in Hollywood all the time too. There's plenty of toxic dynamics in Hollywood movies. But yeah, I think it's changing a lot, and they're showing really great father-daughter relationship.
Whilst we've been doing the podcast, a lot of, we touch on a lot of very negative issues within the South Asian community, but what you've just, I love the fact that you've just said that, these things also happen in the West. And there are certain
Yeah,
things from the Eastern culture that are so positive that sometimes we forget as
absolutely.
a community that we have come from such a rich culture as well.
Yeah.
How do you think Bollywood is now moving on, especially about mental health? I know we've said, the films are getting better, but are
Hmm.
they where they need to be? Especially because we are in a society where we need to raise more awareness because it is such a taboo subject and it is so hard to talk about mental health and the things that are causing these mental health problems within the South Asian community.
It's happening, and I don't want to set the bar so low, but at least it's happening. There was just a movie that came out about a trans relationship, and people were very excited about that, that's great. um I think we just need a minute to catch up culturally too. It's not, I don't think that it's reasonable to expect everything to happen all at once. There's always going to be something that's not including every single person. I mean, even with Crazy Rich Asians, people were saying that why wasn't this type of Asian included, or like why wasn't this group included? And so there's always something wrong with every project, but at least it's happening. At least we're talking about it.
We are getting there. It's just how fast we
Yeah.
get there, especially when there is such a big issue in the community. It's
Yeah,
a
and
tough
I
one,
really
isn't it?
want to like, I people need to realize that there are, in India, I can only speak for India, but in India there's people who are literally at government schools struggling to get water, and your problem is that, this particular issue wasn't addressed well enough in this one movie, so it's like there's no middle ground really yet, and we're just all kind of, there's such a gap, it's really hard to like get everything out at once.
And I'm going to say something a bit controversial, just in regards to. Taj completely agrees with what you're saying. I'm going to go slightly against that, only
Mm-hmm.
because with the fact that the industry is so big, it touches so
Mm.
many geographies, it touches so many different communities, not just the
Yeah.
South Asian community. It comes back to the same thing we were saying before. How much responsibility does it have to be progressive? So yes, there are people with big, we're in a time where obviously, you've got things like wars going on. There's always going to be issues that are bigger. However, for individuals who are suffering, as you well know with your clients,
Mm.
suffering some of these issues, that is the war in their head. So I'm
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't mean to say, oh, well, it could be worse. I
mm,
mean to say that if there are people in India who are not even accepting Hindu Muslim relationships yet,
mm,
give them a second to catch up
yeah,
to gay relationships or trans relationships. Um,
time is what we need, is what you're saying.
time is what we need. Yes.
So I'm going to move on to music as well. So one of the things my dad said quite a lot and says quite a lot is, if you're feeling upset, don't
Yeah.
watch anything upsetting, don't listen to anything upsetting, because that will drag you down even more. And that music does affect our mental health. Now, how do you think, what would you say about this as a professional, in regards to music and mental health?
Yeah, I mean, it's been scientifically proven, right, that music has a huge impact on our mental health, and I think it's really especially, oh my gosh, like these Coke Studio songs that have been coming out recently. They're so therapeutic, and I love to see the younger generations like getting on board with ghazals and Sufi music and like really traditional things that Coke Studio is remixing, and remixing in the sense that like they're just redoing them, not that they're adding like, house beats to the background. Becoming so much more like veering towards the traditional, which is really nice.
Why do you think that's happening, just out of interest?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, hasn't there been like a lot of nostalgia happening lately with like reboots and like Bunty or Bubbly 2 just came out. That was like a big nostalgic thing, and they're remaking Kuch Kuch Hota
Oh
Hai.
my
I've
God,
heard. I
really?
don't know.
Oh, there we are. Even that's
Yes.
a.
Yeah. So a lot of like preying on people's nostalgia and childhood stuff. But yeah, there's like I'm seeing on TikTok like so many younger people, teenagers, watching like classical videos and listening to ghazals and poetry and all this stuff, and I just love it. I love to
Do
see
you
it.
think the next generation is getting deeper than perhaps where we were? Because, like I said, in good old Bollywood, I liked the music
Mm.
that was light-hearted, everyone was dancing, whereas now it sounds like the next generation is a lot more deep thinking than I am.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be, lift teri band hai, like that kind of thing, and now it's like
There's nothing wrong with
it's
that.
pure shairi. Yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I support the 90s Govinda style music just as much, but yeah, now it's like proper poetry. It's amazing.
One thing I love is the fact that you've mentioned that you sit with your mum and you watch the films, and
Yeah.
Bollywood does join the generations as well, doesn't it? It's a positive
Yeah.
influence in regards to that. Yes, we've got the issues, the political and the mental health issues that aren't quite getting addressed in Bollywood. But the fact that it joins the generations where other things might not. What's your outlook on that?
Yeah, I think it's so important. And a lot of these movies, like Mimi was about surrogacy, and they explain in very simple terms what does that mean, who is doing it, especially now with Priyanka saying that like she used
Mm.
surrogacy and whatever, like just a kind of making these topics household conversations where it's like, oh, we went to this movie today and it was about this, like it opens that up in the house, and it becomes like a dinner table conversation, which is so important. Because how else would you bring it up? You wouldn't just randomly say, Mom, what do you think about surrogacy? Or like, what do you think about gay marriage? Like, you wouldn't.
I mean, I
So,
completely agree with that, because obviously, in
yeah.
regards to, I remember my mum years ago talking to our neighbor, I think it was our neighbor or someone, asking
Mm,
what gay meant. And that was a big thing, because obviously this is my mum, I think maybe it was innocence, or the fact that they hadn't been exposed to it. But you're right,
mm.
it does open those conversations up as to, and that's why Bollywood is so effective in and important in what it does.
Yeah, and I've repeatedly had people reference Bollywood too in these like, where I'll say, have you heard about this or whatever, and they'll say, oh, Sonam Kapoor ne kiya tha say in this movie, like that. I remember that because Sonam Kapoor talked about it. And it's like, so they do have this very big influence. So we cannot underestimate how much it impacts
Do
not
you
just a
think quite a
movie.
lot of the movies now are a bit more sexualized than the older ones? Because in the older ones, um,
Yeah.
in the older movies, it was a case of it was all left to the imagination. Now you don't need to have an imagination; it's right in front of you.
I don't know if you saw Geraiya, the new one with Deepika, but that is
I saw an
Yeah,
image of it
I mean,
actually with that one. Even
yeah,
our,
I was pretty
our
shocked.
household was highly censored, so we'd always change the channel. But now I saw an image of it the other day. Actually, I was like, I was still like
Yeah, yeah.
gobsmacked.
Somebody was like, "Is that Deepika?" I was like, "Yeah, that's Deepika." Um, but you know what's strange is that in the 80s and 90s they did show like kissing scenes, like Amir and Juhi, they did do kissing
Mm.
scenes. For something happened between like 95 and 2000s that they just completely stopped. So it was normal like back in the day, and then it completely stopped, and then now it's become normal again. So
I never watched those
Oh.
movies. I think I only watched the ones where there were no kissing
you're
scenes,
not allowed to like,
nothing.
yeah, but wasn't that more sexual in a way? Like it was really weird because they would be all over each other, like everyone would be like soaking in the rain.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
My
but you're
the
favorite
not
rain.
allowed to,
film.
like, God forbid that they actually kissed.
Well, it depended on your imagination, though, didn't it? Really, in those
Yeah.
ones.
But these kind of films I wouldn't watch with, well, I won't watch them myself, to be honest. I'm a bit of a prune. But Bao, you said that these movies bring you together. Maybe the younger generation feel a bit more comfortable watching films like this within a family. What would you say? Because you're considerably younger than me. Do you think it was something that you would watch within a family, or not so much still? Like with your granddad or grandmother, would you watch these films that are a bit more sexualized? Do you feel more comfortable, or
Yes, I think my family in general has always been a little bit more liberal about these things, but I think it also depends on the age. Like if I was in high school or, if I was a teenager watching it with my family, I might feel really weird and just not there yet. But now, my mom and I are, I'm almost 30 now, and so it's like we can talk like friends. It's not,
yeah?
yeah, it's not as weird.
But would you watch it with the male members in
Oh,
your family?
absolutely not. Um,
There you go. I mean, I would watch it with my mum and grandma, whatever, but not the male members.
I don't know. I don't think I'd watch it with my gran. I mean, for her,
oh
I
my
think it'd be too
God.
much to me.
I mean, even for me, it's too much. I am like, what is she doing? But even like Ram Leela and like the more recent ones, I don't know if you saw like there's a song where there's like a lot of smoke and she's wearing like that white outfit. I don't know if you saw it, but it's very
I
intense.
think I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
But do you think, again, this is a South Asian stance to things? If we were, for example, in a different culture, we wouldn't feel so sensitive about watching these
Mm.
sexualized films with the male members of our family?
I think the gender dynamic in general would be so different. I was just talking to my friend who's from Belgium about this, and he was saying
Yeah.
that, you can ask your parents like to spend the night with a female friend, or like, you can say like, Mom, I'm just gonna go spend the night with this friend, and like they might tease you a bit, but that's kind of the extent of it. And I was just, you know, I was like, what are you talking about? Like that is not.
I don't understand this. It's a
Yeah.
different
I was
language.
like, I could be 50 years old and I would still not tell my mom if I was spending the night at somebody's
I'm
house.
with you there.
Yeah, so it's just like the whole dynamic is different. So I think of course the viewing different experience would be different too.
And this touches on what we were talking about at the beginning about the culture difference, about how it is different for a South Asian and the dynamics within a family. And again, it hits. That's why it's very important,
Mm.
not in every case, but to have a therapist that is from the same background as yourself, because you don't
Mm.
have to go from the beginning and explain the family dynamics.
Yeah, definitely. And just the other day, I told one of my clients that, in this space, at least with between the two of us, that no matter what you say, it's not going to change the dynamic between us. And she didn't have that with anyone else, like in her family. Um, so that even hearing that is from someone from your own community is can be really like important.
Although it does beg to question, as we come towards the end of the podcast, have you heard anything that would really shock you? And you don't need to answer that, but that's one thing I'm wondering now.
As in like that they've done something like, or
Yeah, whether there's anything that you'd be like, just like we were saying about watching the Bollywood films that are slightly more censored in front of male members of your family. Is there anything where you'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe you told me that, even though we're both
yeah,
South Asian?
it's it's so funny. It's so funny because I want, like, I am that, of course, creating that safe space, and I would never judge them, but I have to catch myself in those moments where I'm like, oh my God, am I the auntie in this situation? I don't want to like do this. Um, but I wish I had like someone who was like a slightly older and who told me that it was okay and that nothing would change. And
I
yeah,
love the fact that you referred to yourself as the auntie in this situation. That just
I
answers
was
it
like,
all,
I don't
doesn't it?
want to be the mean auntie.
No one
Yeah.
wants to be the mean auntie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's plenty of very nice aunties as well, but yeah, I don't want to be the Nazar auntie.
But in that situation, do you think, in a way, having a therapist that is brown makes it the client, feel okay, it's justified what I've done because it's someone in my community that said that it's okay?
Mm.
Because then you represent the community and you're saying, don't worry about it, we'll get through this. And it's almost like someone from their family saying, don't worry about it, I accept it and we'll get through this.
It's a
Rather
lot of
than someone,
responsibility. Yeah, I want to be that person. I mean, I want to be, sometimes I'm literally the first person who said to them, like, this is okay, like you don't need to have so much shame around this. And regardless of the community, like it's just important to hear that, you know. But you're right, like it is like a Didi or an auntie saying that it's okay, and a lot of us didn't have that person in our community saying that. So I hope I can do that.
It's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, Ragini, now.
It is. I know.
Lovely.
Yeah.
As I bring the podcast to a close, the subject of this podcast, although we've gone off many divergence during the podcast because it's been such an interesting conversation, can you give us the positives, just one-liners, positives and negatives on mental health of Bollywood?
Mm. Positives, starting really amazing conversations that need to be had in the house. Many healthy dynamics that you can see. Major point of connection for many people. Negatives, glorification of certain toxic things. Celebrities not really being held accountable for anything they say.
Because you're obviously very angry about them, but you're like, yeah,
I really am, because every time I'm like, what is happening? And Sara Ali Khan went to Columbia University and she studied social science and she still says things like this. Anyway.
No, it's fine. We'll be getting those statements and making sure they're in there. She'll be hating us after this podcast.
It's just gonna be me. Yeah. If you edit this correctly, I can just be yelling the entire time. But the third I would say actually is a negative for the community, because sometimes people only focus on this kind of thing and they say that, oh, it's so backwards, like, oh, I can't watch those movies, they're so stupid, and they perpetuate stereotypes and blah blah blah. But I don't want people to have that view of Asian community at all, because it's just one facet, just like Western communities have many problematic facets.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Ragini. Absolute pleasure listening to this subject because it's
Same here.
such a
It's been so fun. Thank you.
So it's goodbye from me.
and that's goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_soups, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.